Welcome to the 25th episode of Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Financial Independence with your host, Austin Culp.
And Greg Gaskin.
We have special guest, Zack Gray, today. He is a multifamily real estate investor based out of Massachusetts. Hey, Zack, how are you?
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm doing great. My team and I just got likely our last deal for the year under contract and closed out our first out-of-state transaction. Things are going good.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Was that one of your 2023 goals to be able to do an out-of-state transaction?
Funny you mentioned that. So going into the year, I had a total of 12 units at the time, and my goal for 2023 was to get to 30 units, and I felt like that was a reasonable goal. We absolutely smashed that goal. Where, me and my partner are now at a point. So I have ownership stake in 139 units. So we managed to add over 120 plus units this year. The idea of working out of state wasn't even on the radar going into the year. I think that we managed to execute with really high proficiency on our partner-based deals with investors, and I think that sort of trampolined our success over the course of the year. And by the end of the year, I think that we ended up kind of just in a right place, right time situation, and we were able to capitalize on a really great deal out of state.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I think we also want to talk about your entrepreneurship, what your time in the military was like, and real estate investing. So kind of touch on the entrepreneurship, how did your journey as an entrepreneur begin, and what inspired you to kind of pursue this path?
Yeah. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, I remember it goes as far back as me being 14 years old, putting together flyers on my dial-up computer and posting them at local coffee shops and gas stations to do landscape work. So like at the end of the day, it's like this is something like I looked at it and I was like, hey, I can make some cash. I don't have to pay taxes on it. That's great. It's better than working minimum wage job at a fast food joint. Even though, well, I did that anyway later on. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that's kind of where it started, and that it kind of to touch on the military piece. So the real reason why I got into the military was actually when I was 18 years old. My family filed for bankruptcy, and my parents had told me growing up my entire life that if I did good in school, things would get taken care of. And I always interpreted that situation as my parents would support me if I wanted to pursue continuing education collegiately. And so what ended up happening was I kind of held my own and performed academically. And at the end of my high school experience, I got to sort of a crossroads where my parents basically said, yeah, we have no money for you to go to college. And so at that time, what I did is I ended up working 2 full-time jobs from May to September and basically made enough money in 4 months to pay for my entire freshman year of college in cash. And I got to and then when I was in school, my freshman year, I commuted. I went to a state school. Went to school for business and finance predominantly. And I worked a full-time job and went to school full-time at that point. When I got to the end of my freshman year, I basically said, I never want to do that again. That was terrible. I said, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And so at that point, I had growing up, I played a lot of sports. I was pretty athletically inclined, and I kind of thought about the idea of enlisting in the military and getting school for free. Because the number one thing with my parents having filed bankruptcy was I was not willing to take on debt collegiately because I felt like that would really set me back financially. So at that time, what I decided to do is like I felt like the physical portion of the military, I was like, that's a cakewalk. Like I'm not worried about that. Um, what I'm worried about is like just like the mental bandwidth, the mental, strain demand. And so I ended up basically determining that I could effectively get paid, so I could effectively get school for free. Um, I would get reimbursed my financial aid, so I would effectively be getting paid to go to college, and I could work, full time as well. So that's what I ended up doing. I went to boot camp, took a semester off, came back, and during my time in the military, is actually where I developed a really significant love for fitness, but in particular, it was because one of my closest, you know, kind of connections in the military was an individual who worked as a civilian as a personal trainer. And so he was kind of, alongside me throughout my time in boot camp. And we kind of formed a pretty close bond over that time frame. And it resulted in me pursuing personal training upon coming home when I was going to school. So to get back to your entrepreneurship piece, I ended up enlisting in the military, going to boot camp, coming home, and I got my cert to be a personal trainer. But rather than pursue a commercial gym, what I ended up doing is I basically like built out my own privatized clientele in and around the city where I was going to college, and I was going house to house, training people for cash, and I was doing that from an employment standpoint for my junior and senior year of college. And I think that kind of hits on like just like my time in the military and kind of the inception of my um, entrepreneurship endeavors.
That's awesome.
Very nice. So, were there any specific challenges or successes early in your entrepreneurial career that significantly shaped your approach?
Uh yeah, I think that I think that I pursued that whole personal training thing and was able to kind of have a good solid thing going when I was in college. And when I graduated, I was kind of at an inflection point where I had to make a decision really of whether I wanted to continue training in fitness or whether I wanted to try to make an effort to make use of my business degree and pursue jobs in business or in finance, something of the capacity. And I applied for positions in both. And one of the things that I felt like I realized is I had a lot of friends who were in a similar position with business degrees, and they were accepting jobs post grad where they were basically committing to a 60-hour work week, and they were going to be making roughly about 65 to 70K. And one of the things that I realized is that like, and I from a very young age is that, and I this is a big testament to my time in the military, is that one of the only things in this life that you cannot buy is health. You cannot buy health. So I think that one of my largest concerns at that time was if I go sit at a desk and use my business degree and put in 60 hours a week, what am I gonna be like? What am I gonna look like? And how is that gonna impact me health wise? And there's no way to make up for that. So when I applied for fitness positions and business positions, I had some opportunities where I could have kind of accepted a comparable role to some of my peers. I also simultaneously received an offer from a really high-end luxury fitness facility called Equinox, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with. Uh, so I ended up looking at it from an angle of I basically said, "Hey, I can probably devote 9 months to a year here with this personal training thing at Equinox, and I'm going to figure out pretty quick whether I can hack it and this is going to be something that is going to make sense for me, or whether I'm going to, worst case scenario, doesn't work out and I fall back on my business degree." So at that time, I ended up taking a job at Equinox, working there, and so this is kind of like a lull on that entrepreneurship piece where I mean, in a way, it's like you eat what you kill. So it's like, to a
Hmm.
degree, it's not it is a corporate job technically because you're working for a company, but at the same time, like, you're scaling your business, you're scaling your clientele, you're in charge of how much you work, how much you make. Um, and so I think that motivated me because I think that my compensation was tied to my own intangibles. And so I think that type of job motivated me. And so within the first 9 months, I got myself up to, we had about 30 coaches at the facility at the time. And I was effectively like a top 10% performer. I was habitually in the top three coaches monthly in terms of sessions performed. And I had kind of built sort of a sustainable operation where I was earning six figures at the time. And the idea of making six figures in the personal training space was, that wasn't really a side unless you work in Boston, New York, Miami, or LA. That's not really an option. So I'm really fortunate to have the opportunity to work in that position and to um, take advantage of that opportunity. But I think the bigger thing here is that, and this is what really came to play later on down the line, was that I was effectively operating as a blue collar employee working as a personal trainer in a demographic that is probably one of the highest earning demographics, in the country, which is like Newton, Needham, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. And so this allowed for me to formulate a lot of really strong relationships with a lot of really high income earning, people, um, who really developed a a relationship with me where they knew me, they liked me, and they trusted me. And I think that was kind of the real sort of inception of what has allowed for me to magnify my training business, but also magnify or amplify my real estate business, which at the time wasn't even something that was part of my life.
It's awesome, man. You know, from my experience when I was in the military, man, I would say that kind of helped influence my mindset and like leadership style. Would you say that has it influenced your entrepreneurial mindset and leadership style from the military?
I think my biggest takeaway from the military is that your mindset surrounding what is actually hard is very different. Um, I could go on for days and talk about stories, but e- effectively, we would get woken up majority of the time around 3:30 in the morning, and we are going to run 5Ks at 3:30 in the morning. Um, and then, on an average day, you're probably walking anywhere between 10 and 15 to 20 miles. Um, I think that uh, the entire time in which I was in boot camp was from January to March. And so the average temperature per day was anywhere from 25 to probably 40 degrees. And I'd say over half the time I was there, it was raining. So it's like, you're spending 12 to 14 hours a day outside when it's 25 to 40 degrees and you're holding a metal weapon, which certainly doesn't make your hands feel all that great. And you're probably putting in 10 to 20 miles of walking, and you're probably getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. Majority of the time, the sleep is broken, meaning you're getting 3 hours, got to do an hour shift, and then 3 hours. So you're, grossly sleep deprived. And I just think that a lot of those things, it's like I came back to real life, and it's like, all right, I got to wake up early. It's like, who cares? It's like, I got to put in a 12-hour day. It's like, I'm inside. It's heated. It's like, there's elements of this stuff where it's like, you get back to real life and you're just like, it's not that hard. And so I think that it corresponded to me taking a look at everyday life and just saying, like, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to be the most educated person in the room. You need to be the most you what sets you apart from achieving success is working hard. Like, the majority of people just don't want to wake up that early and put in that much work. So what it comes down to is, like, if you're willing to, it's like the way I look at my life right now is like, I wake up at pretty much 4 o'clock every single day, Monday through Friday. On the weekends, I normally wake up around 5 or 5:30. And it's like, if I'm starting my day around 4 a.m. and I'm starting to make money at 5 a.m. while most people are sleeping for another 3 hours, it's like I'm making money now where you're sleeping, and now that's going to free up my ability to use the middle of the day to do other things, and so, or the tail end of the day to do other things. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's kind of like the Kobe Bryant mindset, where it's like, if I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm training, it's like you cannot get enough shots up to match the amount of practice that I'm putting in. It's the same mindset. It's like you cannot get as much work done between 9 and 5 as the amount of work that I can get done from 5 a.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. And it's like, now take that over a day, over a week, over a month, over a year. Now let's compound it over 5 years. And it's just like the compound interest that enables, it trampolines you into such a different life than you're capable of if you just put in an honest day's work.
It's a great
Yeah,
answer.
that's perfect. Yeah. So, speeding up a little bit, are there any, like strategies or, approaches that you take to navigate like tough times in the business? Because I know, like, being a personal trainer and in real estate, the last few years probably haven't have had a lot of difficulties.
So during COVID, I think a lot of people looked at something like fitness and they felt like, I felt my immediate thought was, this is threatening to my livelihood. And I was concerned about my ability to make money. So my number one concern was, in order for me to make money, or in order for me to, not to sink my battleship here, I got to figure out a way to mitigate my liabilities. Number one. And my biggest liability at the time was my mortgage. And so the way that I looked at it is, I said, this is the time where I have to pursue, and this is what started my whole mindset towards real estate. This is where I said, I have to be willing to sell this house that I live in, this townhouse, and buy a multi, live in one unit, rent out the other unit, so that I can live for free. And if I can live for free, my ability to take risk in regards to my business is indefinite. And so now what happened is I put myself in a position where I said, hey, thankfully, one of my biggest concerns with personal training is a luxury service. So in a time of economic hardship, it's probably one of the things that's going to be first on the chopping block. And I recognized that from the second that I graduated and I took on this job. So although I was earning six figures at Equinox, I was living off of 30K, 35K. I didn't have a TV.
Wow.
When I started dating my wife, I didn't have blinds on my windows. I was eating a lot of rice and beans and tuna fish. I was really focused on being efficient, and I was saving as much of my check as I could, and it became a game where I said, how efficient can I be with my resources? And so, because I knew it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when there was going to be economic hardship. And so I said, when that happens, I need to be prepared. I need to be overly prepared. And so what happened was, this to me was like ringing the Liberty Bell. I was like, this is it, baby. This is what we planned for. And so when everybody else was freaking out, figuring out how am I going to navigate the situation, I said, I got some equity in my house. I can sell my house. I can buy a duplex. I can live for free. I got a fat set of savings set aside for me to start getting serious about how I can make some moves here. And so what I did was I traded in my car. I bought a pickup truck. I had a fair amount of fitness equipment that I had purchased previously. I loaded all that stuff into the back of my truck. I was driving around house to house to house to house to house all day long, training people from 5 a.m. to 7, 8 p.m. sometimes. And what I was doing is I was going to their house, training them in their garage, training them outside. I was training people outside on the Charles River in Cambridge. I was training people in West Newton, 25, 30 minutes away. I would drive to Lexington, which was 25 to 30 minutes from there. I was going all over the place. And what I was doing is I was leveraging local Facebook community groups, because what percentage of people are sitting at home, uber dialed in, starved for social interaction, trying to figure out what's going on in the news locally? So what I was doing is I was basically saying, everybody's sitting at home and everybody wants a solution to their health, because it's something, and this was a time in which you have excessive free time, you have excessive disposable income. And I actually looked at this and said, this might be the best time for me to pursue new clientele. What percentage of people want something to do? So what happened was I was able to actually scale the amount of training that I was doing. And then what happened was I got to a point where my capacity to train was limited by the number of hours in the day and number by transit. And so the entire time that I was driving around house to house to house to house to house training, all I was doing from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, bigger pockets, bigger pockets, bigger pockets, bigger pockets, bigger pockets, all day long. It's the only thing I was thinking about. And so I'm not going out. I'm not spending any money. I'm living for free. I'm stacking money. And I basically just did that for a year because there was nothing else to do. And I just pushed it to the brink and said, how hard can I work? And so when the variable became, I'm limited by hours in the day and transit time, I started to pursue local gym owners who were really in a tough spot because they had these massive leases where they were on the hook, for a fair amount of money on the space that they had. And so what I did is I found a fitness space where they sectioned off space into independent rooms. So they had independent training studios inside of a building. And so I basically went to this individual and I said, I want to rent out a training studio, but I want to be the only person that has access to it at all times. And I said, additionally, I'm going to be doing a significant amount of volume. So normally you charge by the hour. So what I did is I went and said, here's the deal. I said, you normally charge by the hour. Well, here's a rough idea of how many hours I'm going to do. And I said, so what's the volume discount? And I said, if I operate and I do, 25 hours a week, I pay this price. If I do 35 hours a week, the price per hour decreases. If I do 45 hours a week, the price decreases. If I do 55 hours a week, the price decreases. And there's a cap. And so the one move that I still to this day I'm so proud of is when I signed that contract and I negotiated that deal, what I did is I did not sign the deal as Zack Gray. I signed the deal as my business name. So now what that meant is that technically I didn't need to perform all of those hours. So now, there was no stipulation on how many people I could have in the room. So what ended up happening is as guidelines loosened, what I was able to do is I was able to hire somebody else. Then I was able to let that person train under my business name, and we could do 70 hours a week. But the price per hour was so thoroughly reduced, right? Because we had negotiated it as such. And then the guy basically hadn't even thought about the ability of me to bring somebody else in. So I basically was paying next to nothing from an increased standpoint in regards to rent, but I was able to scale my business, and basically all I had to do was just pay my employee and pocket the rest. And then additionally, there was nothing that said that person couldn't train in the space at the same time as me. So now I'm paying for 1 hour, but I'm making money off 2 people. So this allowed for me to really scale the amount of money that I was making, which further amplified my earnings.
That's awesome, man. That's great to hear. So I have 2 questions actually.
Yeah.
One, I think I already know the answer to this. What branch and what was your MOS?
I was Army, and so I actually started as an all vehicle mechanic. But my sergeant at the time basically said, you don't you turning wrenches is a waste of time. He basically was like you need to be doing something, not turning wrenches. He was like, there's plenty of dudes that can turn wrenches. And as you can see from having a little bit of this conversation, it's like the gears are always turning, and like I'm kind of a little bit of an OCD person. So I actually, there was 3 guys that ETS exiting my unit at the same time, and they all worked under our supply sergeant. And so the supply sergeant was effectively looking for somebody to take over the role of kind of being like his understudy. So I ended up transitioning into working in the supply section of our unit, and I worked under our supply sergeant. So basically, all I was doing was like ones and zeros and inventory and stuff like that all day.
Okay. I was also Army, but I was an 11 Bravo, so I was infantry.
Yeah.
The other question that I have, man, is I think you shared a great example of a risk that paid off well for you, but what was one that didn't, and what was the lesson that you learned from both of them?
Oh, risk that didn't pay off.
if any? You might not have had one.
Um, that's a tough one.
It's all good.
I have to think about it a little bit, but the main thing for me is that, like, in regards to risks, like, I think my mindset surrounding risk is like, you can analyze situations and you can take, and effectively you're looking to take calculated risk, but in the event of taking a calculated risk, one of the biggest variables that dictates whether the risk ends up working out or not is your willingness to just take as much relentless action as possible to ensure that it works out. Um, and so, like, my entire life, I've just sort of felt like if I take enough relentless action, failure's not really an option. And so, like, you know, there's not really a specific thing that I can point to where I feel like, damn, this really didn't work out the way that um, I anticipated or wanted. But I think that's a byproduct of effectively just saying, like, there's no like work week. There's no like time in which you're like, all right, like, as an entrepreneur, it's not like you're like, all right, let's wake up and it's time to work today. It's like, I'm thinking about what I'm doing, the next move, have to-do lists, have checklists, and it's like I'm thinking about that every single day, all day long. And like I'm acting on those things every second of every day.
Mm.
And the only time where I feel like I'm not doing those things is if I'm taking care of my health. But if I'm taking care of my health, it amplifies my ability to continue to operate at that capacity. Or if I'm sleeping, and I try to target like 6.5 hours a night, that's what kind of leaves me feeling good. If I'm anything below that, it's no good. I would say like, 7, I feel like $1,000,000. But sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And I think a big key in this is that your support your support system is everything. So, you know, at the time I was dating my wife, and throughout this entire process of starting my business, of scaling real estate, of house hacking, of moving from property to property, and all this craziness, she has probably been one of my number one supporters. And it's never a situation where we're dealing with, why are we moving, or what's this, I don't agree with your decision making, or battling me on me working so much. It's like, I basically sat down with her and said, hey, here's the deal. I'm going to go full tilt for 5 to 7 years here. And all the things that you want are going to exist. And it's like, are you cool with that? And she's like, I support you implicitly. And it's like, all right. So what this translates to is that, like, in my home life, it's always equilibrium. It's always, we're on the same page. There's no disagreements, need to explain. There's no, back and forth about like, oh, well, there's not enough time and we don't spend time together and we don't go out and do this and that. It's like, listen, it's like the same way that I'm scheduling in time to take care of the things that I need to do. I'm mindful of the fact it's like, hey, I got to spend some time with the person that I care about. I have to, make sure that we're going on dates. I got to make sure that we're doing fun stuff together. But I think that plays a huge, huge role in your ability to just move forward and continue to achieve success at such a relentless pace, is that having a support structure that just says like, yeah, go for it. And I think that, like I said, I do not know something that has not worked out for me in the last 3 to 4 years of this whole process.
Mhm.
You know, I'd love to be able to give you something, but I just can't.
That's okay. No, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, is your wife also involved in your, training business as well as real estate, or is she kind of like she has her job and then she just supports you in your endeavors?
My wife is not involved in my training business. My wife wants nothing to do with the real estate stuff. um,
Okay.
you know, uh, the extent of involvement is like she needs. The extent of the involvement is that as long as she doesn't have to drive over an hour to her job, and as long as we're not living in disarray, I think ultimately she signs off. The reason I'm laughing is because one of the craziest stories that I can give is that um, we were living in that first duplex that we bought, that we were living for free, and we had bought in another house hack that we were set to move into, and the timing of it translated to she had not even seen the apartment that we were going to be moving into. We were
Mm.
getting married, and literally the day after our wedding, we had boxes packed up that were going into a U-Haul the next day, and we were moving into this apartment that she hadn't even seen. So like this just goes to show you like how much she's like, hey, whatever it takes, if you're telling me that I can have my dream house with my dream lifestyle and that setup in 5 years, and you're gonna be able to spend ample time with our future kids and our family, and that we're gonna be able to live the lifestyle that you and I want, and it's like this is what it takes, it's like sign me up.
That's awesome, man. How old are you now?
I just turned 30.
Oh wow.
Just turned 30.
Huh.
My wife is 29. And I think that, we've kind of loosely just talked about starting to have kids in probably the next year or so.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Congratulations.
26, and I think I'll let Greg speak to how old he is.
I just turned 31.
Okay. Nice.
So we'll kind of transition here into the real estate investing part, man.
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned Bigger Pockets, but were there specific mentors or resources that played a crucial role in your real estate journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I will always have a soft spot for Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner, David Green. Like nothing matches that. Like I learned so much from that tandem. It's like I'm eternally grateful for that. Um, that was pretty impactful for sure. What I would also say is that I think one podcast that actually uh, doesn't get enough recognition, and something that I found to be really impactful, is there was kind of 3 different podcasts that played a pivotal role. I definitely rock Bigger Pockets more excessively than some of the others, but I think Bigger Pockets for people who aren't already in real estate can be a lot. And it can be a lot to understand. Like, I already had done a fair amount of research and had a decent understanding of real estate investing, tax code, um, you know, loan options, things like that. Where, like, if you are completely blind to that stuff, it can be a real kind of like just thrown in the deep end of the pool kind of situation. Um, one of the podcasts that I found to be really helpful throughout my early professional life, but also my my time during COVID, is a podcast called The Money Guy Show. Um, it's
Love that show.
it's effectively like two guys that are like CPAs, and they just talk about like if you're looking to if you're looking to be financially stable and retire in life, what steps you can take on an annual basis to set yourself up for financial stability, and how much money you should aim to allocate towards your car, how much money you should aim to allocate towards your housing, how much money, how you should aim to pay down debt, how you should aim to contribute to retirement accounts. Like, these are all things that I feel like normal people don't really have answers on, or anyone to go to talk about. Um, and I found that podcast pretty impactful toward just my financial literacy skills. I think that additionally, there's if you're a business owner, there is a podcast called Small Business Tax Savings. I don't even remember the name of the guy who does it, but there's some pretty cool, intricate stuff in there talking about how you structure your entity, how to maximize your tax savings from things like um, buying vehicles, accelerated depreciation, retirement contributions, HSA accounts, like things like that. Uh, those are helpful, and I found that to be pretty impactful from like a mentor standpoint. Um, and then like that's kind of just hitting on like education sources. Um, Again, to get a little bit more intricate, not necessarily a mentor, but there's for business owners as well. There's a book literally called Advanced Tax Strategies. Um, you would actually it's actually I believe it's actually a Bigger Pocket sponsored book, but it sounds a little bit dry. I didn't find it to be dry. I was easy to get through, and I found some cool stuff that was helpful for my business to be able to minimize tax burden. And I think that that is really helpful for people who are independent business owners. To kind of get back to like your mentor piece, so the real inflection point for me that translated into my success over the last couple years was I began I sought out going online to Bigger Pockets and sought out local meetups. And that was the differentiator for me that allowed for me to get to where I am right now. I began going to a specific local meetup in the area that was hosted by a brokerage that was specifically targeted for investing related purposes. That at my first meetup, the first two people that I talked to were Wendell, who I just did my first deal with out of state. He now lives in North Carolina, and we bought a deal 40 minutes outside of Charlotte together. The second person that I talked to at that meetup is now my business partner, and we do all of our deals together. So that's literally just a testament to like how valuable local meetups are. Like, I cannot bang the drum harder on the value of local meetups. What I will also say is that like I've had some of my most intricate questions answered at meetups. I've had some of my most pressing concerns, completely tabled at meetups. I have had some of my best business ideas surrounding scaling at meetups. I have found deals with equity day one at meetups. I have found partners. I have found contractors. I have been referred to contractors. I found my preferred attorney. I found my at least one or two of my preferred lenders. Like, I cannot go on enough about how easy it is to build the ecosystem of all the pieces you need to be a real gunslinger in real estate investing by going to local meetups.
Great advice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any advice for our listeners on getting started with starting a business or real estate? Any further advice than what you just finished providing as far as different podcasts and books?
I think back to this a little bit in regards to the business thing. I think your highest ability to create earning potential for yourself is through running your own business. I think that creating your own business is probably one of the most daunting, challenging things to do. I don't think you have the ability to create your own business unless you have little to no financial burden. So my outlook on this is that you have to have a decent job to get yourself in the door. You have to get yourself into a living situation that does not require you to pay any money, which is, in my opinion, buying a house hack and living in a multifamily. I think if you do that, your ability to get creative with creating your own business is far greater. If I were to go, I've always thought about, I was in an extremely lucky position. I work in a really high earning demographic. I think that plays a huge role in my financial success. But I think back to if you drop me anywhere in the U.S., what would I do? What would I do to start over? And my answer to that is the easiest route for me is I would go to trade school. I would learn a trade. I would go work under somebody who's really good in that trade for a year or two. I'd develop the skills. I would go start my own business working in the trades. I'd hire a bunch of VAs to leverage my promotion. And then I would hire people to work underneath me. And one of the things that I so strongly believe in that has resulted in me being able to have success in my business and running my business is, in your business, your goal is not to maximize every single dollar you earn and to retain it. Your goal in your business is to get as many people rowing in the same direction as you. So however you can do that, that is what yields power. That is what yields potential. And so with that being said, it's because if I hire you as a corporate employee, you look at it and you say, I'm going to show up at this time, I'm going to leave at this time, and I don't give a shit what gets done. And I'm just here to get paid. But the fact of the matter is, what I do in all my operations, in real estate and in my gym business, is I figure out who can do the jobs that I need done and who can do them well. I will compensate them above market standard to incentivize them to work for me, regardless of what that means for me. Once I have them in-house performing, and I'm not in no way, shape, or form am I maximizing my earnings. I understand that. But now what I can do is now I can incentivize that person additionally by saying, here's the deal. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give you a percentage of all sales of NOI of the business. So now you care about burning money. You care about inefficiencies. You care about not converting leads. You care about every single item, thing, anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to go hire somebody else and we're going to pay them above market average. And you're going to have that person report to you. So what I'm saying is you're not looking to make every single dollar and keep it in your pocket. What you're looking to do is you're looking to get one person in the door, win their trust, buy their loyalty, and get them to row in the same direction as you. And if you can do that, not only are you going to develop such a strong culture within the confines of your business, you're going to develop relationships with people that will go to bat for you till the end of time. And that is where power lies. Because the biggest detriment to success in business is having to retrain, having to repay for hiring, to having to retrain, repay, and start from scratch and lose all that productivity in the meantime. And additionally, if you don't have to worry about what's going on within the confines of your business, how successful can you be? Because you know what I know? I know that if I have the freedom to operate with a clean schedule and unlimited amounts of time, I have no concern surrounding being able to make more money and be productive myself. But what I need to know is I need to know that I got people going to bat for me, that are doing what I expect of them, and that are incentivized to continue to do that regardless of whether I'm around or not. And so that to me is what I would say from a business standpoint has been the most impactful to me having success. In regards to real estate, the same thing applies. You know, me and my partner, what I would say to you is my partner who does all my deals with me, I had unlimited connections with people that had deep pockets, that were willing to invest in deals, and that were willing to do it with me because they know, liked, and trusted me. But you know what I didn't have? I didn't have systems. I didn't have, how are we storing all this information? Who's doing the back end admin? Who's storing all of the files and receipts and everything in the Google Drive? Who's keeping track of all that? Who are we using for bookkeeping? How are we keeping track of our vendors for our projects? What's our processes surrounding rental applications? What's our processes surrounding instituting rent increases? How do we go about conversations of stabilizing buildings when we acquire? These are things I didn't have systems for. And what I would say is my partner had all of those things. But you know what he didn't have? Access to resources. So what I said is I could go take all my resources and I could go buy deals and say, F that guy. But what I did is I said, here's the deal. I'm going to cut you in. And what we're going to do is you and I are going to get equal share of ownership stake. And we're going to pay, I'm going to do this. So it's like, I'm going to do the same deals. I'm just going to, just for shits and giggles, let's say that we're doing a deal. Investor brings all the money and, we're splitting the deal 50-50. 50% goes to the operators and 50% goes to the investor. That's a great situation. But with that being said, I'm just operating in this fashion for simplicity's sake. Out of the 50%, if I was running that deal, I would get 50%. But if I'm doing it with me and a partner, I'm only getting 25%. But the fact of the matter is, so I'm giving up half. I'm giving up half of that deal and I'm giving up half of every deal. But now what's going to happen? I have access to all his systems. I have access to all his connections. This guy worked for one of the most prominent investor-based brokerages in the entire state. He has mentors above him that own 1,000 units. Right? Now what's happened is I've operated as a GP on a syndication with his mentor that owns 1,000 units. I wouldn't be in that position if I wasn't partnered with him. That wouldn't have raised my credibility to allow for me to go scale and raise private capital all over the place to do more deals. So the name of the game is do more deals, not conserve every resource for yourself to make sure that you earn every dollar that you're entitled to. It's about giving up a piece of the pie to somebody else so that they will go to bat for you. They'll go to row in the same direction. Every time I get a lead, I send it to him. Every time he gets a lead, he sends it to me. We have a joint CRM. We have a joint network. Every deal goes through us. Now, as he's scaling his portfolio and I'm scaling my portfolio, right? Because we now, let's say we each have 20 or 25 or 30 units. Well, now we got a portfolio of 60 units. But what we did is we said, okay, here's the deal. We're going to bring in a property manager, young kid, who we're going to coach up. We're not going to hire a property manager. We're going to coach up a property manager ourselves. So now we got a better deal on property management because we coached the kid up ourselves. And then now, with that being said, he's operating both of our portfolios, which now means we can have a full-time employee, which now means we have somebody who can take stuff off of his plate and my plate. So if we can have stuff our plate, now again, it comes back to the same thing we talked about before in the fitness business. It allows for me and him to go full tilt ahead doing what we're good at. And now, with that being said, again, that person who's that property manager, he's an 18-year-old kid. This kid reached out to us and said, I want to get into real estate. I want you to hire me to be your property manager. And I had a lot of concerns about this not working out.
Mhm.
What I said to this kid is I said, all right, he called me. So he called me. I called him up. He called me and left a voicemail. I called him up at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Now, what I want you to think about is, what do you think an average 18-year-old kid is doing at 8 p.m. on a Saturday?
Anything but work, man.
Exactly. I remember what
So
I was doing.
it was real loud. It was real loud in the background. He took the phone call. He stepped away, and he took the phone call. He talked to me for probably 30 or 40 minutes. And I said, okay, this kid's pretty serious about this. And so then what I said to him is I said, here's the deal. You want this job. I want you to meet me at Starbucks tomorrow at 6 a.m. Now, what percentage of 18-year-old kids do you think are going to be willing to wake up at 6 a.m. on the weekend for anything?
0.
Okay. So what I will tell you, and I said, we're going to have an interview tomorrow morning. So what I'll tell you is I showed up at the Starbucks at 5:45. The kid is inside sitting in the chair waiting. I said, you're hired. The fact of the matter is that person has been one of the most impactful people in my ability to scale my portfolio because he has taken on every single burden that me and my partner need to have handled so that we can be successful. Now, we told that individual, when we feel like you're ready and you are up to proficiency in regards to being a PM, we will now start to cut you in on deals. So you have an 18-year-old kid that now is going to be getting equity stake in real estate for just showing up and doing what he's supposed to be doing. But again, that is a testament to, again, getting people aligned with your objectives and being willing to continue to row in the same direction as you. So now this kid is going to be making thousands of dollars doing these deals with us, managing our units, and he's not going to quit. He's not going to go away. And how much of a runway do we have to have this kid work with us, scale him up, get him his own deals, help him out? It's going to change his life. And all he had to do was show up and learn, and just do a good job, do the best he could, and learn. And so this is how I like to do business. This is how I feel is the best way to succeed in life, is to focus on putting as much relentless action as you can through your own time, and then to share the resources with the people who help you achieve the outcomes that you are working towards, because I think it perpetually allows for you to continue to progress.
Wow, you dropped so much knowledge there in
I'll say that's
such a short time,
amazing.
man. Yeah. I guess one last question, Zach, for you while we got you. If people want to reach out to you, from listening to this podcast, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So best way to reach out to me is probably via Instagram. So super easy. My tagline is at the 1099 mindset. And that is and then it's 1099 mindset.
Okay. We'll
So
make sure to include it.
What was that?
Well, we'll make sure to include it in the once we drop the video on the podcast, we'll make sure to include it.
Awesome. And so, whether you have questions about, getting into real estate, whether, you're looking to partner on deals, whether you're looking to invest money in deals, or, you just have some questions surrounding either, your business or in regards to scaling your real estate portfolio or anything like that, I'm going to be more than happy to help. And, feel free to reach out.
Great. That was awesome.
I want to thank you for your time today. And it was a lot of knowledge dropped today. So hopefully our listeners gain everything they can from this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. And, I'm happy to have helped. And I hopefully that, some of the words that I shared, impact other people and allow for them to rise up.
Great. It's awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Life, Love, and the Pursuit of Financial Independence with your host, Austin Culp.
And Greg Gaskin.
With special guest, Zack Gray. Thanks again, Zach.
Thanks, guys.